Hi, my name's Audra. Thanks for joining me today. Today we are talking about Paul's third and final missionary journey during the book of Acts. If you haven't had a chance, I encourage you to watch my first two videos on his first and second missionary journey, just to give you a whole picture of his travels. This third missionary journey essentially begins as soon as the second one ends. If you remember, his second journey actually ends in Jerusalem, and the third one starts in Antioch, which is approximately 300 miles apart. And so obviously we remember that Luke is writing this book. He's observing, taking into account everything that Paul and his companions are telling him. He records them, and that's why as soon as the second one ends, the third one starts, and that's why it ends in 1822 and starts in 1823. When Paul leaves Antioch for his third missionary journey, he travels through a lot of the cities that he went to on his previous journeys, and we know that he probably has so many companions, friends, churches that he's checking in on as he travels. And as he travels, he makes it to Ephesus, and he rejoins Priscilla and Aquila, if you remember them from his second journey, and Apollos also joins him at this point. Paul spent the bulk of his third missionary journey in Ephesus, almost 2 years there, and he preached the gospel, he performed miracles, so many amazing things happened. People could even touch him or touch something he had touched and they would be healed. But as the usual, things get chaotic, so everything gets riled up, and once it settles back down, Paul leaves and heads on to Greece, and he stays there for about 3 months. After this, he was going to leave and head on to Syria, but he heard about a plot against him, so he changed his course and headed on to Macedonia. As he was traveling, he decided to stop in Troas for 7 days, and if you read this account in Acts 20, it's another just, can you really believe this happened story? And in it, Paul was just inspired, and he was preaching and preaching and preaching. And he was preaching all night long, and a young man was near a window. And so while Paul is preaching, he falls asleep and falls out the window 3 stories down, lands, dies. Paul runs down there, throws his arms around him, and then says, "He's alive." And Paul's response is to run back upstairs and continue preaching. I just think this is so comical. And, if you ever give your pastor a hard time for going over his message, think of this account. At least you're not falling out of a window. After leaving Troas, Paul's goal is to get to Jerusalem before Pentecost. Before that, he does make a stop in Assos in Mytilene. And also, again, as you'll see at the very end of Acts chapter 20, he does make one more stop in Ephesus. As Paul leaves Ephesus, we come to this heartbreaking, emotional portion of his journey where he tells the church, these companions who he has served with for years, that he will never see them again. The Holy Spirit has told him over and over that when he gets to Jerusalem, he's going to have to endure hardships, trials. It's not going to be easy after that. And he believes the Holy Spirit, yet he obeys and continues on his journey. So he keeps persevering, continuing on his way to Jerusalem, and he ends up stopping in Tyre, Ptolemais, and Caesarea. And in Caesarea, a prophet even tells him, "Don't continue on, hardship awaits you." But Paul ignores him and keeps going. Finally, Paul makes it to Jerusalem. And this is the end of his third missionary journey and the beginning of a lot of hardships, a lot of persecution, because just as predicted, the Jewish leaders turn him over to the Roman government. And we see so much in these last few chapters of Acts of Paul having the opportunity to preach to the Roman leaders, yet still being persecuted, in prison, and so much more. I want to encourage you to reflect on all of the places that Paul visited during his 3 missionary journeys. Think about all the miles that he traveled without our current modern transportation. Think about all of the people who he met, who he had the opportunity to preach to share the gospel to. And I hope that is a challenge to you today, to not waste a minute to preach the gospel, whether it be words or actions or anything. Just spread the good news, be a light, be a witness, no matter what will come after. I pray that Paul is a challenge to us as we live each day for God. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope these videos have been helpful, giving you a picture of Paul's journeys, and see you next time.